From what are GMOs to why GMOs in the country? How do they affect us as maize producers and consumers, and in consequence as a country? From the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, Jkuat News sat down with Dr. Sylvester Anami from Jkuat Institute for Biotechnology Research to put into perspective some of the most burning questions surrounding the topic.
I will try to begin by bringing the Wanjikus closer to the definition so they can appreciate. I know very well that a long time ago, maybe 30 to 40 years, or even our parents and great-grandparents, used to control maize stalk borers by taking soil from their surroundings, or even ash, and they put it on an infected maize, and the maize stalk borer could die. So clearly, they did not know that the soil that they were taking was actually containing a bacteria. And it's that particular bacteria that had the capacity to kill the maize stalk borer. Now, the organic farmers isolated the same bacteria and then be able to produce a biopesticide. They use the biopesticide to spray on an infected maize, and the maize stalk borer dies. So scientists nowadays isolated the same bacteria and then did isolation of the DNA. They transferred the DNA into maize, and that maize became genetically modified.
The professor insisted that genetically modified food is safe as it is similar to any other foods grown locally.
The truth of the matter is that studies have been done, and most recently by the European Food Safety Authority, on the assessment of the risks and health effect of GMO on health and animal feed and also the environment. And they have concluded that GMO foods are not different from conventionally produced food, and even GMO that was actually used as reference in those experiments. And therefore, to date, there is no evidence that GMO food causes cancer or it has any health risks both to animal or to human being.
He reassured Kenyans that rather than kill biodiversity, GM maize and specifically BT maize will in fact complement biodiversity.
Biodiversity includes things like, for example, the bacteria and the microorganisms within the surrounding, the plants within the surrounding. We also part of the biodiversity. Now, how can a genetically engineered maize contribute to the loss of biodiversity? It's not possible. I do not envision that, because we only are in a position to be able to integrate a bacterial gene for a specific trait in that particular maize. And if we talk about the microorganisms present in an area where the GM maize is growing, the microorganisms can only be interfered if the protein expressed by that particular gene gets into the soil. But that has not been demonstrated. There is no evidence that protein that is expressed for the control of the stem borer gets into the soil. So the soil biodiversity is still intact. In fact, the growing of GMO enhances biodiversity in this sense that you will not need a pesticide to be able to kill the maize stem borer. And that pesticide does not just kill maize stem borer, it kills other insects, which is a biodiversity. So the growing of GMO in fact contributes to enhancement of biodiversity.
The doctor explained that GM maize does not pose a threat to locally grown seeds and plants through cross-pollination or any other form of contamination as a result of genetic modification.
There are several things that we look at. One of the things that we look at is the sexual compatibility. If, for example, they say it can actually just, the pollen can actually spread and just not necessarily go to a sexual compatible maize variety or even a wild type, they expect that shall have maybe super weeds in the environment. The super weeds, like for example, the plants you see around me, are not sexual compatible with maize. So there's no way there will be cross-pollination. Now, cross-pollination will actually happen if the maize that is in close proximity are sexual compatible. And in most cases, it's always a wild type. Now, when you look at that crossing of the transgene, it happens that we need to look at if the hybrids that comes from the crossing, what is the dominancy or what is the fitness of that hybrid. It has been demonstrated that the hybrid that comes out of it is not fit, and therefore it cannot substantially affect the surrounding maize in any way. That has been demonstrated.
The professor has called upon Kenyans to trust the Kenyan experts on this issue, saying that as a country, we are capable of self-cultivation and consumption of genetically modified organisms.
So in this country, we have scientists who are even involved directly and indirectly in the development and deployment of the biotechnology and the GMOs. And this scientist means that Kenya has the capacity to be able to produce a GMO crop. I want to ask Kenyans to trust in their own scientists. I want to ask them to trust on the evidence that exists on GMOs. I want them to really trust the information that is coming from the scientists, because they are the ones who are involved in the development of the technology. They are the ones who will be involved in the monitoring and evaluation under the National Biosafety Authority. And Kenyans should also trust their regulatory agencies, and if there are any challenges, then of course the regulatory agencies need to be strengthened so that they actually ensure and the safety of Kenyans.
For Jkuat News, I am Dirango Mohoho.